Hello out there. Welcome to Culture Vultures. I'm Sandy Frye, your host. Our creative producer is Nancy Cole. And this is a program that investigates arts and culture in the Tampa Bay area. But before we get to the Tampa Bay area, I'd like to reference something by way of introduction. Last month, I had the occasion to go to the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, where the latest blockbuster museum exhibit was called How Big Were the Dinosaurs? And let me tell you, 140 million to 160 million years ago, size really counted. A creature who was built to size and just about filled up the exhibit room. This was called Mamenchisaurus, and it was found in China all those million years ago. It was 11 feet high. It was 30 feet long. It weighed in at 13 tons. It had to eat about 1,000 pounds of twigs and leaves a day, but it kept them in its stomach for as long as 2 months. Whenever you see littler creatures running away from grand lizards, as they were called, I don't think they were running for their lives because a lot of them were plant eaters. I think because they really weren't fit to be around. At any rate, the exhibit was interesting because it had many things that kids would love to examine. For example, it had a big plexiglass bin that showed the actual amount of 1,000 pounds of leaves and twigs. And it shows what you can do with $1 million or more. That's my estimate of the cost of the exhibit. But then I got to thinking of something. It's not always cost. In fact, it may never be just the cost. It's really the creativity and the ingenuity in presenting information to varied audiences, knowing what they will find interesting and compelling. And for that, I could think of no better guests to talk about that than the executive director and the curator registrar of the Henry Plant Museum. Cynthia Gandy is the executive director, Susan Carter is the curator, and almost 2 decades ago, they took a musty relic and made it a breath of fresh air. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And as an observer of the museum for all that time and before, I think you've done marvels. Did you enter together, by the way? You entered in 88?
88.
And
actually, I started around 1981 as a college intern.
Oh, my.
And it just sort of evolved into this great position that I have today.
Wow. Well, there are 2 things that are singular, I think, about the transition of the Henry Plant Museum. The first is that you're an accredited museum, and that's something that you assume when you hear the word museum, but it's not always true. Cynthia and Susan, first Cynthia, how does the process of being accredited go?
Well, it's a rather long and grueling effort. There is a 3-year self-study that takes place. So the staff and the board, the trustees, everyone associated with the institution actually examines it thoroughly, every aspect of it. And then we submit that material to Washington, and there is a site visit, interviews with local residents and other museum professionals. And then about a year later, the answer comes down, and we're terribly proud because there are 17,500 museums in the nation. Less than 700 are accredited by the American Association of Museums. And you assume that everyone is accredited because clearly universities and hospitals and other institutions are, but museums are not. Mm-hmm. And we are terribly excited to be listed up with the Metropolitan Museum and with the Smithsonian and with some of the very leaders in the field.
Yeah, well, as well you should. Susan, you have had the experience actually of becoming a curator before and after. Did you come in, by the way, did you accept the job thinking that this is what you would like to do?
Oh, yes.
You did.
though I didn't really believe in my heart that it was possible, but I knew we wanted to try.
Right.
The building was built as a hotel
That's
in
right.
1890, and it was not museum-like in any way. So I knew it was going to be a challenge, but I knew it was something that we should do.
They must set certain standard marks that you have to meet when you have the environment of a hotel and you hope to present information and exhibits. What do they require of you?
Well, certainly quality control in the area of climate and humidity is of utmost importance.
That's too bad. You didn't have that going
Oh, we
in.
certainly did
No,
not.
I remember that.
We have replaced all of the original windows. Well, actually, that is not true. We did not replace them. We conserved them and restored them. We received a grant from the state of Florida, which we matched, and the whole project was, what, $400,000, Susan?
Yes.
Huge for us. And then, of course, collections policies are very important. You must have a mission, and we didn't back in '88. And we created a mission with the help of lots of our shareholders and stakeholders. And that mission is to interpret the lifestyle of the early Florida tourist and to show the importance of Henry Plant and the development of Florida and Tampa. So in the early 30s, the museum was founded in 1933, and we were taking lovely items, museum quality items, many of which had nothing to do at all with the Tampa Bay Hotel. So we had to get our collections policies in order. We had to create a code of ethics for everyone associated with the institution. And we really had to increase the level of our programming and our exhibits, which we have done.
Susan, were you registering all of these gifts or acquisitions? And did you have to deaccession some of them?
Well, we did. We had to make some very tough choices. Gifts were taken in, as Cynthia mentioned, in the 1930s. We were the only game in town. Everybody that had anything to give to a museum gave it to our museum, and we accepted it. And as we've evolved and come up with a better mission that's more fitting for our property and our museum, we have had to make very tough decisions and deaccession things. We really make a big effort to try to find another institution or another local venue that can house these objects so that we're just not selling them out on the open market. We really try to find the right home for them, and we think we've done so.
It certainly takes the sting out of having something that you think is wonderful and belongs in a museum having to be returned, not because there's anything wrong with it, but because it doesn't match the lifestyle or the mission of the
And there's
museum.
nothing quite as hurtful to a family
I'm sure.
to have given an object to a museum and have it ultimately deaccessioned.
Right.
So we very, very carefully pick
Sure.
and choose, and we are not truly a collecting institution at this point.
The rooms that reflect how the hotel looked and the furniture in it is authentic.
Most historic sites of our age are not lucky enough to have the original furnishings. We are.
Okay.
The important things never left the building. The hotel operated between 1891 and 1933. So we collected and inherited objects that had been used and abused by all of those hotel guests.
I imagine so. Then you had to have them restored.
We are still having them restored.
But nonetheless, they have such a charm. The big, what do you call it? The big poof that everybody can sit on in the round.
Yes.
Does it have another more elegant name than I've just
Not
given
for
it to
me.
you?
Maybe our curator will know that.
Roundabout.
Roundabout. Okay, that's good. Well, I had heard, and it's probably a long time ago, and it had really nothing to do with the Plant Museum. It had to do with the Plant Hotel, that a lot of it had been stored, and some pieces just sort of disappeared. How do you go about authenticating something that may have come from Paris? Because I know the plants went to Paris for the exposition, the World's Fair really, when the Eiffel Tower was the big deal. and came back with what, 11, 13 trainloads?
42.
42? Oh,
Well,
amazing.
you know, it's a challenge because I think Susan has certainly developed a rather remarkable eye for what would have been original to the hotel. But the only true way we can document is with early photographs.
Right.
So we have hundreds and hundreds in our archives, and we take magnifying glasses, and we find objects.
That's like being an honest-to-God detective.
It is, it's fascinating.
It is
And
fascinating.
What's
I'm sure.
fascinating is even today, people are still finding old brochures and more photographs. So they're just like gold to us when we come across them because they reveal one more aspect of the hotel that we might not have known before.
Interesting. Well, let's go on to the National Historic Landmark. How did that happen?
Well, of course, our building is rather remarkable. It's such a opulent building, Moorish Byzantine architecture with minarets. And so many people think that is the reason we're a National Historic Landmark, because of the architecture itself. But that isn't it. A landmark status is given to a building that has significance in American history. And we are a landmark because we were the headquarters for the United States Army in 1898 during the Spanish-American War, which is, of course, when our most important guest visited Teddy Roosevelt. And I think it was about 1977 that a group of citizens and politicians, perhaps, applied to Washington and documented the importance of our building. And we were accepted into that status.
Are there any responsibilities you have from there?
Appropriate preservation and conservation of the materials and of the public spaces, yes.
Any further presentation of information concerning Tampa's connection to the Spanish-American War? I'm thinking specifically because this is the exhibit that I think that the letters of Henry Dobson, a gallant volunteer, as they all were, with very, very few exceptions, from a National Guard unit, I would assume, in the Spanish-American War, who stayed here, who commented on life in preparation for the Spanish-American War, and unfortunately who never would mature, never have a family, because he died at the age of 20, and not in fighting in battle. He died like most of the young men, and I think spent a few days fighting, and then the real trouble began by the disease that were apparent in the countryside, for which at the time there were no medicines available. The dysentery, the dengue fever, the malaria, the yellow fever, you name it. The tropics is wonderful at presenting and encouraging the growth of viruses, bacteria, and unfortunately it did hit a lot of people. But it gave the viewer such an insight into a kind of gallantry and enthusiasm and a connection with America that I don't know if anyone would recognize today.
Until we had the letters and displayed the letters and interpreted those letters, that exhibit was a book on a wall. It was about the explosion of the Maine. It was about the troops coming to Tampa. It was about the building being headquarters for the correspondents and the generals. But it wasn't intimate and personal, and it was lacking in emotion, I think.
Right. How did you bring it to life?
I think Susan was the very person that was in the office on the day that a relative of Henry Dobson's came to us. So I'm going to let her tell that story.
Yes, Henry Dobson's grandniece stopped by the museum. I believe she might have even been taking classes at the University of Tampa. But she happened in and she let us copy these wonderful letters. And she had preserved them for her family. And we put them in the files and we sat on them for a number of years. And then When we created the Spanish-American War Room, these letters came to life because it did give you the personal experience. It's his original words. They start out, "Dear Mama," and they tell exactly what he was thinking. And they're just remarkable.
Are the letters read?
Yes, we created an audio. Not only did we reproduce the letters and we have them in a notebook that people can come in the room and read every single word, but we also created an audio with voices. So we have a Henry Dobson voice in the room, and people can press the audio button and hear the voice of Henry Dobson.
So, and these are professional voices. It has actually led now to another theater piece that you have done for many years, Upstairs, Downstairs, and he will be a character, will he not? And
Yes.
his debut is coming.
Yes, it is.
Keep track on their website, Henry Plant Museum, and you'll see when Upstairs, Downstairs is coming. If it's the same schedule as it's every Sunday
It's every Sunday at 2.
at 2,
Around September through May. Now, we stop for December when we host our Victorian Christmas stroll.
right?
But other than that, it's just about every Sunday at 2 o'clock, and the information is on the website.
Very good.
These letters are so personal and so
That's right.
poignant. They begin when his train hits Atlanta, Georgia, and he begins writing, "Dear Mama." And he writes about his fear, his loneliness, the terrible food, the dreadful place that is Tampa today, or then. And it's every emotion that I suspect a soldier today
I'm
would
sure.
still feel.
It's that genuine voice that
Yes.
comes through, and the thought that that all of these lives were cut short, and it was the last volunteer war. I can remember reading something about Roosevelt, who actually owes his presidency, in my opinion, to the Spanish-American War. The Rough Riders offered an iconic image, and he used it well. I
Yes,
have
he
to say.
did. And of course, it was called the Splendid Little War.
It was a well,
And
not for the young men.
And it's really the first time the country came together after the Civil War. Those Army generals had fought against one another only just 30 years earlier.
That's
And now they had come together on the veranda of the Tampa Bay Hotel,
Right.
kind of rocking in the rocking chairs, waiting for the war to begin.
Very good.
But yes, Teddy Roosevelt became President of the United States, but we did not want to forget about Henry Dobson, the
That's right.
19-year-old young man who died.
Right. I went through Columbus Circle Center just 2 days ago, and they have the 9/11 testimonies of heroes who survived. And it's their voices. It's Henry Dobson's voices that reach us, which
Yes.
is wonderful. Well, I know there's another facet to the Henry Plant Museum, and it's the education. And for that, after this break, we're going to introduce another member of the staff.
Tampa Bay Community Network, may I help you?
Hello, I would like to produce a TV show on your planet.
Great.
Do I have to be a Tampa resident?
No, you don't have to be from Tampa to take our video production training classes or to have a show on our channels.
Really? Well, I'm from another planet. Is that okay?
It's fine. Tampa Bay Community Network members come from Orlando, Valrico, Lakeland. They come from everywhere. Being from another planet is no problem. You're from our galaxy, right?
Yes, I am. How do I get started?
Sign up for orientation class. We have them twice a month and they are free.
I'm in. Sign me up.
Anyone over the age of 18 can take TBCN Video Production and Final Cut Pro edit classes, produce programming, and host programming right from our studios at the University Mall. Call 813-977-5200 today and sign up for our next orientation class, no matter what planet you're from.
Joining us is Heather Truby Brown, who is Curator Education of the Henry Plant Museum. And it's nice to know that you fulfill that mission for younger students who come and visit the museum, as well as the educational content of the exhibits for mature audiences. At any rate, what is it composed of?
Primarily, our Our major focus is working with the youth, the school groups that come through. Over 2,000 children from Hillsborough and Pinellas County come through the museum every year on field trips. But we also have a Books to Schools program where for Title I schools, we go out to the schools and take the museum to them. And we have wonderful volunteers who help with that program. They read a fabulous book called Maggie and Max Visit the Museum. And then for our high school students, we have Through the Keyhole. And so they're interactive books that engage the students and introduce them to the museum when they might not be able to come on their own. But then we also work with the adult groups that come through, and then we have our live theater program in addition to the exhibits.
The upstairs, downstairs?
Yes.
Yeah. Describe that.
It's every Sunday, starting in September 11th through the end of May at 2 o'clock in the museum, and it's an intimate theater experience. We have 7 characters in our cast, and they range from hotel staff to famous guests at the hotel. I believe Theodore Roosevelt has been mentioned earlier today in addition to Henry Dobson. And so they're 2 of the characters, and we have Edith Roosevelt. We have Otis Friedman, the head waiter at the hotel, and Maggie Stroud, the laundress. Pauline Smith, the telegraph operator. Arthur Schliemann, the hunting and fishing guide.
Right.
But we have 7 in the cast, and they perform a 30-minute monologue in the museum, and it's part of our visitors' experience. To get to hear the words and thoughts of those who are staying at the hotel or working at the hotel.
Yes, and it's very authentic. I saw the hotel and heard the hotel operator and Maggie, and Richard Harding Davis also. Most people are really unaware of the fact that there were a number of resort activities at the Plant Museum, which were firsts of their kind, certainly for Tampa, and very possibly for the state. He had a golf expert design a 9-hole, I think, golf course. They had Arthur Schliemann, who took people on rides up and down the Hillsborough, and took them fishing too if they wanted to go.
Alligator hunting.
And alligator hunting. Oh, well, how many people, I wonder, took advantage of that? When I have seen pictures of fishing, for example, at the turn of the century, particularly in Boca Grande, men in what looked like Clint Eastwood type long dusters would go out in a rowboat into the middle of the pass and try to hook, 150-pound, 200-pound tarpons, who would probably take them to Cuba, because, and I couldn't imagine how they possibly did it, but they were used to a much hardier and more challenging environment, and so that it became the first Magic Kingdom, and that's what I think your introduction video is about. We didn't mention that you had, as part of the display of information about both the museum itself and about Henry Plant and about the Spanish-American War. And by the way, Henry Plant was instrumental in getting Tampa named as the port of departure for the American Army contingent. He was an arts lover as well. He played the organ, I think. He had a theater that was a bona fide theater and had visiting artists anytime.
The Tampa Bay Casino
And the
was
casino.
the center for all social activity right up through the 1940s in Tampa.
That is amazing.
And all of the celebrities of the world came.
Right.
Sarah Bernhardt,
Yes.
Nellie Melba, my personal favorite, John Philip Sousa. Who else am I missing?
Booker T. Washington.
Oh, yes.
Ah, that's very interesting. It was really a varied production, and it brought culture to Tampa in a way that it never did before. A 100-year-old woman described how elegant the dances were, and she said there was none of this fancy dancing that you see nowadays, no hip turning, right? Just beautiful waltzes. And I could believe her. It must have been a lot nicer. At any rate, the floor rolled back, and wasn't there a swimming pool under it?
Yes.
I think that's enchanting too. I think that's wonderful.
So too. And during the day, it was a swimming pool, and the boxes were used for changing rooms. And at night, the boards were laid back, and it became the theater. And when Anna Pavlova came, there were 2,000 people packed into the casino waiting for her. They waited over 4 hours. And when the boat arrived, they didn't have time to put even the sets up. And the next day, the Tampa Tribune headline was, "She came, she danced, she conquered."
It's wonderful. Well, Tampans, I'm sure, were glad to have any kind of culture then. Another person who had attended an event, a theater event, saw one actress, professional actress, do a whole play, taking the voices of every character in it. And she said it was marvelous. And we are so spoiled these days with 1,000 outlets for dance, for music. And you can imagine how magical it might have been if this is the first artistic thing you've seen all year or ever.
That's right.
And I think that kind of contribution to the culture of Tampa is important. I think any first artistic experience or cultural experience will have an impact on the community, especially if the standards are high, which is another reason why we invited you, I think, because the standards are very high at the Henry Plant Museum, and the exhibits are creative and insightful, which is that's the name of the game. I mentioned before the show began that I think Night at the Museum must have started things, because ever since that movie, exhibits, it seems to me, have become more high-tech, more engaging, and more meaningful. And you certainly are in good company. Thank you, Sandy. Good to have you. By all means, make it a point to visit the museum. And thanks for being with us.
When I grow up, I want to be a heart surgeon. I want to be a heart surgeon because to help kids in their heart problems, just like the doctors helped me when I got a new heart when I was a baby.
Advisor is being accused of committing one of the largest investment frauds in the history of the United States.
I guess we're not going to Aspen. That's fine. You see, I like tennis balls. He likes insider trading. So he's going to jail and I'm going to a shelter. And no, they're not the same thing. Shelters are for good pets that want to be adopted. Jails are for criminals. I did nothing. Uh-oh. Okay, I stole a cheeseburger once. How my dog?